Hey guys, it's Sadie. Welcome back to Hear Me Out. This week, you already know what we're talking about, actually, if you happen to watch last week's episode. But in case not, for the specifics, I'll clue you in. I am just going to be giving my tips for beginners, essentially, aka what helped me go from not running more than maybe 3 miles in a few years to running a half marathon in about 3 months. So that's just what we're diving into today, kind of as a continuation of last week's episode. And I definitely just need to start by giving context because to kind of expand on what I had just said, I was really kind of starting from, I won't say ground zero, but ground one. So I would have considered myself, or I do consider myself to have been active in high school and to have been fit even, but I feel like I was a very specific type of fit. I rode crew in high school, so in terms of the ergometer, like which is the rowing machine if you're familiar with in the gym, or cardio, like I was honestly a pretty decent runner, and with that I would also kind of run fast. Like I was always a sub 10. Well, okay, in my head, like when you're going long distances, like that's fast to me. I cannot comprehend actually when people are running full marathons with a 5 minute mile. So for the sake of today, we're considering fast sub 10 for like when you're going more than 3 miles or whatever. But so even in high school, I would do like 8:30 miles when I was running a 5K for testing or something like that. So I would honestly consider my peak fit like junior year of high school, maybe even sophomore year. And then I ended up getting injured in my senior year, so that was a whole nother thing. But then with that injury, it was just kind of a bit of a downhill in terms of what I could do, and what I felt I couldn't do at least was cardio for long periods of time, such as running. And so yeah, I just never ran very long. The most I had run in my life before going into a training process for this half marathon was 8 miles, and that was a one off. Like I did a 7 once and an 8 once, and clearly it was a one off from me specifically remembering where I was on that day when I ran that much. So it's not like I would have done that very often and then all of a sudden I just forget about it. So I hadn't really run long distances. And if I had, it was a one off years prior to this. So I'm a sophomore in college at the moment. So this is literally 4 years, like 3 years later from that peak fitness in my head, at least. I'm just not doing organized sports anymore. And so obviously it's just a different kind of regimen and discipline when you don't have someone telling you to be here for practice, do this after practice, eat that, you know what I mean? So with that, however, this whole process was figuring out said regimen. I was figuring out how much water I should drink, what I should eat, how much I should run when, because I had actually tried to do this half marathon the year prior. I remember starting in December, maybe, I don't know. Whatever I thought I was doing, which I wasn't doing very seriously or well, I had gotten runner's knee almost immediately. Like within the first month, I was just overdoing it. Like my body wasn't used to things and I didn't really work up to anything. And I also wasn't really cross training, which is a point I'll get into later. But with that, I had runner's knee that was so painful and I didn't know how to deal with it. And that was just bad. So this time around, my first tip that I would highly recommend is using Nike Run Club. So Nike Run Club is an app that you can have on your phone and it's totally free. Like I would not have paid any more for this than I needed to, because full transparency with the marathon price or half marathon. Anytime I just say marathon, no, I ran the half. I did not do 26.2. I'm not hyping myself up like that. But so the race entry fee is $150. And then with that, I find it's really hard to be a quote unquote cheap runner when so many influencers and even just athletes, like with their sponsorships and stuff, are promoting things that we don't really need. Like, I felt myself just having to remind myself of why I run, what the point of running is, and how people have been running long before running gels even existed. So I was kind of like back and forth in terms of conceding to, or like surrendering, I guess, to the capitalist side of the running community, very much so. And then also thinking that maybe it wasn't just a placebo or something and it would make my life easier. So I'll kind of get into what I deemed worth it a bit, but going back to Nike Run Club and not skipping past that too fast, honestly, one of my biggest tips, it is free. It is a training plan that I won't necessarily say caters to you, but it caters to your timeline. So you set up, like, if you are 10 weeks out from race day or something, they give you a reasonable plan, that just shaves off miles, and it tells you like what to do when, and it gives you 5 workouts per week, and you can do anywhere between 3 and 5. You need to do a minimum of 3 to move on to the following week, which doesn't seem like a lot, 3 runs in 1 week. But if you're doing cross training, like, it makes it really flexible, and you can decide to do guided runs or not with it. And so I always did a guided run. I think for one interval workout, maybe I didn't do a guided run, but they helped me so much. They have athletes come in, like if you're familiar with Eliud Kipchoge, he is the first person who have broke 2 hours in the full marathon. He is a world-class runner, and he came on for an episode, and it feels like you're doing a podcast while you're running, but one of my favorite parts about it is that it doesn't override your music. So I would have my like playlist going because I need that kind of beat, and that helps me stay focused. Like, I can't 100% tune into a podcast, but then it would kind of silence my music a little bit. It's not like I'm going crazy with a bunch of noise, and then that becomes overstimulating. But so they would talk, they as in Coach Bennett, who is like the head of like the Nike Run Club plans and everything. So he, I think, leads almost all of them, and for this program he probably led like 75-80% of it, if not more. So you get to kind of know him, but then he'll interview, quote unquote, Eliud Kipchoge, for example, or he had just a few other world-class runners that they sprinkle in. And then they also they have a great mindfulness program. So sometimes you're doing long runs, and they talk about controlling your breathing and your mind, and how it's like a mind battle as much as a physical one and stuff like that. So they seem to have it down pat. And again, I had started about 3 months out. So my first week looks like running 15 minutes. And then it was a 20-minute. And then it was like a 2-mile or something. And that's another great thing that I really loved about this program, was that it went mostly by time. If you had 5 runs a week, 4 of them went by time. What I mean by that is, like, you're not running 2 miles until it's done. You're running 20 minutes, and you run as much as you can in that window of time. Like, the amount I ran in the first 20-minute was definitely a lot less than by the end. So it's just a clear difference between like your first 20 and your last 20, for example. And I found results to be a lot easier and less self-competitive when I wasn't going with distance. So it was really starting off from the ground up. 15 minutes, like, anyone can do that. Even if you're fast walking, like, I was just going around tracks inside and stuff. I wasn't even running far enough where I needed to be outside and finding this like long path or something. So cannot recommend Nike Run Club enough. And I actually tried to do that during race day, and I didn't download the run before race day like a rookie, and it wouldn't load because so many people were on, just the data in the area. So I like couldn't get on it, and I was low-key freaking out. So I was really sad to not have that on race day, because I had done a practice half before with Nike Run Club's half marathon. And so having heard that before in my ears and known like the checkpoints and what was going to be said to me during the race, I was planning on that being really comforting, and unfortunately it wasn't there, but that had me tuning into my surroundings a little more, so maybe it was a blessing in disguise. The second thing I'll talk about is cross training, which again I've alluded to already, but getting into that, I did not cross train, honestly, and that was just stupid of me, especially considering I had already been kind of injured the year before from this, and apparently I just didn't learn. And then all of a sudden I was maybe like 3-4 weeks into this, maybe even longer, and I really started to feel it, and I was like, wait, I should have been cross training, but I was like, too late, like too late to no, it's never too late. Just build it into your regimen. It is great injury prevention, especially when you're trying to avoid runner's knee and you're trying to avoid, like, if you have bad hips. I find I have bad hips. My legs, fun fact, are actually slightly uneven. One is slightly longer than the other. So then with that, I need to like balance my hip flexors and this whole thing. And yet I wasn't really taking that seriously. And my life would have been a lot easier if I had done exercises from the get-go to strengthen, in particular, my hip flexors and then my hamstrings / like just your IT band for your knee. So, because then I was honestly doing really well, and I was thinking, wow, I don't have runner's knee. Like, this is great. Nike Run Club really not steering me wrong. But then eventually it did catch up to me when you start getting the higher miles of in 1 week running a 7 and a 10 in between other things. So the weeks probably like if you're 3 weeks out from the race day is what I'm trying to say, and then 4 weeks out from race day, kind of in that third quarter of your training is when it gets pretty demanding, and that's when I started to have knee issues. So I ended up actually ordering a knee band off Amazon, just like $9 or something, and that helped keep my kneecap in place. But even though we could get into certain things that help after the fact, I think it's really better to be proactive, and if you're into weights, you kind of know what to do. If you're not specifically trained towards like running, weightlifting, but then again, after I started having knee issues and I was being reactive instead of proactive, I started doing, even just like in my room, there's a lot of things you don't even need access to a gym for, and you can kind of improvise. So I was doing different hip flexor strengthening in like just on my floor, as well as hamstring strengthening as well, and that did help it a little bit, but again, it was a little too late. So certainly cross train, and don't think that you could go without it like I did. Okay, in terms of hydration, this is really, really important, as is food, but I almost find that water is more important. Hydration is definitely more than a night before thing, which I kind of found out again the hard way from the first time I ran 10 miles. The first time I ever ran double digits in my life was in this program, and holy crap, was I struggling. I was also dressed way too warm for the day that it was. It was like the first warm day in spring, but I started running when it was 36 degrees out, and then it ended at 55 degrees maybe. So I was in like leggings, a long sleeve with a shirt on top of that, blah, blah, blah. So there were other factors playing into it, but I could feel the dehydration creeping in, and I was really struggling. I had just so much, when you have saliva on your tongue and you just know the feeling. So I was really struggling with hydration, and that's where I really kicked it into gear and was like, no, I'm going to invest in Noons, which also, like, shout out to my parents as well. In particular, my dad is very into fitness and everything, and so he was very willing to help with this because it is expensive. Again, this gets into the very real part of how running has a capitalistic side to it, and is certainly a privilege if you can kind of go the extra mile with monetary support, you know what I mean? So I had done Noon electrolytes and UUN, and they are great. I actually have one in my water here right now, And it's something that I've continued after the marathon just for general like health. And I've gotten in a habit of it, and getting in a habit of drinking a lot of water. Again, you don't need the electrolytes, that gives an extra boost, but still drinking like a gallon a day sort of thing. Multiple hydro flasks or Yeti water bottles or Stanley's, whatever you have, that makes a huge difference. And I thought I could just the night before, or excuse me, the day before, drink said gallon of water and stuff, and then that would carry over into the next day. But that's not the case. You really have to, it's almost like allergy medicine. It doesn't work the first day. You really need it to like get into your system for you guys to just like, which also, actually, side note, I'm cutting myself off. This is kind of why I sound the way I do, which is not normal in my head at least, is allergies. I feel like I have a head cold 24/7, and I've been taking medicine and blowing my nose every 2 seconds, and I still sound like this. So apologies for that. But definitely just get into the habit of drinking a lot. If you really need to, set alarms each day that will remind you how much you should have drank up until that point. Really just put mechanisms, like build mechanisms for yourself that will really enforce that, because it just makes your day-to-day even out of running a lot better, I find. I'm sure there's statistics to back this up or some kind of studies, but generally I feel like that's a well-known, accepted thing. Okay, for my girls who have chafing problems, maybe even guys, and you for some reason refuse to wear biker shorts that are long enough where you don't chafe, buy Chafe Safe. Chafe Safe is so great, saves lives, honestly. It's not foolproof, and you might have to apply it again mid-run, but it lasts a good while, honestly. You can put that anywhere, and honestly, I don't just use it for chafing on my thighs. I use that for boobs, and like my like underneath, just kind of like sports bra lines and stuff like that. It helped so much. Like randomly, sometimes you don't even know that chafing is the issue, and why you're uncomfortable in your clothes is because they're chafing, not because they don't fit incorrectly or something. So any derivative of a chafe stick seems to be great and working, but the one that I find is particularly helpful and awesome and pretty foolproof is Chafe Safe. So definitely hop on that one. Honestly, kind of a random throw in, but sunglasses are great. Invest in them. You don't want to spend your energy squinting at the sun when it's just much better spent elsewhere on long runs in particular. Even if you think it's a cloudy day and it's not going to be sunny, trust, I was training in the Pacific Northwest, and every single time almost I went out for a run, it was incredibly cloudy or raining or one thing or the other. So I wouldn't bring sunglasses, and then all of a sudden for 20 minutes or something there would be a parting, and the sun would be blaring down on me, and I would be squinting, and I couldn't really see where I was going well, and I was just spending too much energy squinting. So that's a throw in, but highly recommend that. Download your playlist, similar to how you should download your runs, especially if you end up using Nike Run Club, because you don't want to be like me on race day where I was on mile 12 and I was on my victory lap of it all, and I tried to play Dreams and Nightmares, full transparency, by Meek Mill to like hype me up and run me home, and it wouldn't load. And that actually wasn't the first part in the race where my music kept stopping, and you can see the pending loading sign of Spotify, and I was really frustrated just by my stupidity for not having thought of downloading your playlist. So you never know where you're going to be running, how far you're going to be from connection. So don't mess your vibe up, and just make sure to download those ahead of time. Okay, gels. Again, back to said capitalism. I think you can get through runs with some kind of sustenance that doesn't have to be like $2.75 a pack or something. I have done both. And honestly, my runs went better when I was running on expired granola bars compared to when I was running on the Goo brand. And that, granted, was because I didn't realize there were non-caffeine versions. I thought that almost every gel, at least the ones that I were serving, had caffeine in them. And one of my friends was like, wait, she this was after the fact of the race, and I had to like stop for the bathroom because of the caffeine in it, and I was telling her about it, and she was like, wait, what? I never ran with caffeine. I only ran with the gels that were just the carbs to give me energy in that sense, not literally almost the like sugar caffeine high or whatever. And I was like, wait, duh, that makes so much sense. So this also is kind of like a do your research point, because I was doing my research and watching reviews of gels and comparing them with the prices and what they did and such, and textures as well is really big. But I didn't do enough research, I feel like, to know that basic fact. And that kind of hurt me in the end, because obviously of just how a lot of people's body responds to caffeine. Honestly, they were really good though. So I did the Goo brand vanilla, and that I had no complaints about the texture, about the flavor, anything like that. It went down really easily on runs, so that was great. But then again, I did practice 13.1 with expired granola bars. Like I had 2 granola bars. You just kind of need something to chew on, something to signal to your brain that you're getting sustenance. And like, it's just not smart to do really long runs and think that you don't need to bring a little water bottle with you or something to snack on. I know people though who do Sour Patch Kids, who do just straight up candy, sugary candy, and they have that sugar high, that kind of energy from that. It's really whatever works for you. And again, if you just have something lying in your cabinets, totally grab those. Do not feel the need to invest in gels, because they do get expensive. It just hurts your pocket. If it's fine as a one-off, but if you want to get into running long term and maybe races are your thing, just be mindful of that, because I certainly am going to be. So we'll see how that works. I would like to try a non-caffeine version though. We'll see. And I know a lot of people, side note, really like the honey stingers gels as well. So between Goo brand, and I can recommend that one. Other people I know recommend just candy, and other people really like the honey stingers. So check that. Okay, about 1 or 2 more here. Maybe the most important one that I have and will say, and that is to get rid of your ego and run slow. Trust me, it makes the experience so much better. I thought that this process had to be hard. And it was at times, don't get me wrong. There were a lot of days that I didn't want to get out of bed, and my body hurt, and it was cold outside, and etc., etc. But it was harder mentally than physically, 100%. And that is because I decided to go slow. And if you do the Nike Run Club app, they will explain this to you. And they will reiterate it every single time. Even when you're running 10 miles weeks into your program, the first thing they say is to start off slow. And one of the best pieces of advice I got was that your first mile should be your slowest mile, almost like by far, compared to your last mile at the end of the day. So knowing that, it immediately took the pressure off the fact that you have to, yes, kind of warm up, but still get out to a really steady, fast start, and then to keep that throughout. I don't know why I thought it had to be grueling and that I couldn't look around and see my surroundings throughout this whole process. Like, again, if you're training for time, ignore this, but if you're just trying to start from square zero, the first thing you need to do is to just run slow. Like, have a realistic expectation, and it's fine to have goals and be like, oh, I want to run, even if it's like an 11-minute mile for a half marathon or something. That's great, but I wouldn't necessarily start with that time goal. Start for endurance and get rid of your ego. It's the best thing you can do. At the end of the day, you're all on the same finish line. If you run a half marathon, you run a half marathon. I don't care if it takes you 4 hours. You did it compared to all of the people in the world who didn't. So just run slow, look around, and there will be a lot of people with you as well. There's a lot of great community, especially when you're running slow enough where you can talk to people, or you just, I don't know, laugh at the people who are taking running too seriously. I don't know why I had this image of me running on race day, just, grimace on my face and really struggling through it because I'm so concerned about my time. I learned really fast to throw that out the window, and my love for running, or at least reestablished love of running, came from that reality, from me just being like, wait, I can do this 100%. I don't really know what else to say about that, so I won't exactly continue. Although that then gets me a little into the greater culture of running that I had experienced and I'm having opinions on right now, which will get to my final point then of a recommendation. But touching on running culture and how I'm feeling about that and how that impacted my time on TikTok in particular, there was this craze, I'll say about a month ago, and this was right before the race, and it was all these runners being exposed for not doing the workouts that they claim to do, and for like photoshopping their times and stuff. So if they were to post a Strava or something, it would just be inaccurate times. People who would go out and run 500 meters, not even, filming themselves going at such a fast pace, and then would just like walk home and stuff. There were so many people that weren't putting in the work behind closed doors, like off the screen, but everyone was was only seeing this highlight reel, whatever they're posting, and was taking that face value and having it impact at least this was my impression in terms of just people on comments and how it made me feel as well. And people were just like then getting really angry, but then also like it was just the weirdest thing when everyone was being exposed and coming out and people were like, see, I knew that was never really true. But then it becomes a matter of who can you trust, who can you find motivation from online. Then like, if this person's lying, and it was a whole long list of people, is there anyone great that you can get tips from and confide in? And so between that and then also what I guess would call like binge marathoning, just kind of like chronic serial marathoners. Maybe this is a thing that resurfaces around marathon season every year, and maybe I was just aware of it because I was running one, so I was taking in a lot of content via YouTube, TikTok, articles, and even just trying to again find what electrolytes and gels I wanted to try. I was just hyper aware of all of the people that were running multiple marathons in 1 month. That's insane for people to run multiple marathons in 1 week. And specifically though, people who this isn't their job, they don't make a living off of this, and like they're not Olympic athletes or anything like that, which is another layer of unrealistic expectation. But then it's just not for everyone's body, and it might not even be for those people promoting it, like for their body. It really takes a toll on you. It's a process, and it really grinds your body down. And if anyone knows Brett Chody, who, if you know Jake Shane, they're like really great friends, she had made a post about this essentially, and people were like, oh, why aren't you running Boston? Because I think she's from there or something. So people were like, oh, it's your hometown. Don't quote me on that part. But she was essentially being like, wait, we need to take a step back and realize how insane a feat this is, and then with that, being proud of the one you ran, and also knowing your limits. Like, why are we normalizing running so many marathons in such a short period of time? It's just really not healthy and sustainable, and like your joints are going to break down, whatever. But then my response to all of this content was, then I was looking down on my half marathon. I was like, wait, months ago, you couldn't run more than 5 miles effortlessly. Less than that, frankly. And you, like, months ago, I would have been so insanely proud of this half marathon. Like, this was your goal that you have tried once at, thought about for long, and haven't accomplished. You finally accomplish it, and then all of a sudden you're looking at everyone else who did double that, and suddenly that invalidates your experience and your efforts. And so to me, that was a bit disheartening, but I just needed to shake myself awake and be like, wait, no, you did that. You're running your own race, you're having your own process, and know that there's just something off about all of these influencers who, also keep in mind, are getting access to these marathons really easily. It is not easy to be selected in the lottery or whatever. Like, people try to get into these races and for years and might not ever get a bid to Boston or a bid to, like, whatever it is. So the fact that people can even easily register for these, and they're really expensive, in my opinion, like $150 out of my own pocket, like as a college student, that hurt. I physically like recoiled from that electronic receipt I got when I paid for that. So like, people can't necessarily afford to do normally, maybe like they're 170. They might even be more expensive. Each city's different, but like the full marathon in Eugene was 170. So 170 times 6 in a month or something. A lot of people can't afford that. There are so many things in the running community that people take for granted as being a privilege. And I feel like this could be an entire podcast episode in and of itself, because I've always been pretty aware of this, but in terms of passionate, again, this process has just given me perspective and empathy versus sympathy, and just kind of like knowing when things are coming out of your own pocket and whatever, really having an understanding of like running being a privilege, even being able-bodied and having access to places that you can run outside while feeling safe. Like, that is all a privilege. So I feel like a lot of that just gets lost in the conversations online, and it's just normally montages to trending songs of people running. And I mean, those are great, but they just can't be everything. I feel like when we're promoting the running community and stuff like that, it needs to be a little more nuanced, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. So essentially, the last tip is really just be proud of yourself and be patient with your setbacks, your obstacles, with your, like, when you overcome and accomplishing things as well. It is all extremely valid, especially when it's not your full-time job. Like, when you have school, if you have kids, and like you have so many other responsibilities to balance, to even make time for yourself, much less like accomplish a goal that takes months to accomplish. It just very much be proud of yourself, and don't have highlight reels online and just random one-off comments by people and stuff invalidate your experience and how far you've come. All right, I feel like that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much for listening to Hear Me Out. If you don't know it by now, follow at HBU Hear Me Out on Instagram for more. We have video episodes on YouTube as well if you ever want to check those out. And feel free to give this video a like, but otherwise it's not that deep if you don't want to. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I really, really appreciate it. And go do hard things that make yourself proud. All right, I will see you guys next Sunday.